Twilight Champion. Chapter 1. The harsh wind of the outlands whipped across the barren plain, carrying with it the acrid scent of ash and regret. Sir Auric, once the brightest star of the Sunlit Order, now stood a solitary figure against the slate-gray sky. His once resplendent armor, forged in celestial light, had dulled to a tarnished sheen that matched the desolation surrounding him. Auric's gauntleted hand rested on the hilt of his sword, a habit born from years of vigilance. But now the gesture felt hollow, a reminder of oaths broken and trust betrayed. He gazed out at the rocky hills that marked the border of his self-imposed exile, eyes searching for threats that seldom came. "Another day in purgatory," he muttered, his voice rough from disuse. As he made his way back to the crude shelter he called home, Auric's mind wandered to the glittering spires of the Golden Kingdom. In his mind's eye, he saw them not as they once were, bastions of hope and light, but as he imagined them now, dimming beacons in a world slowly succumbing to shadow. The memory of his fall from grace crashed over him like a wave of darkness. The sundered valley, the hesitation, the lives lost. Auric's jaw clenched, the weight of his failure a constant companion. Inside his shelter, a structure more fit for a hermit than a knight, Auric removed his armor with practiced motions. Each piece told a story of former glory, the breastplate with its faded engravings of celestial battles, the pauldrons that once shone like the sun itself. Now they were relics of a life left behind. As twilight descended, Auric lit a small fire, its warm glow a poor substitute for the divine light that once filled his being. He sat before the flames, his weathered face etched with lines of sorrow and regret. "How long?" he whispered to the fire. "How long must I bear this burden?" The flames offered no answer, dancing silently in the growing darkness. Auric closed his eyes, allowing himself a moment of vulnerability. In the privacy of his exile, he could admit the truth he dared not speak aloud. He longed for redemption, for a chance to reclaim his honor and purpose. But as quickly as the thought surfaced, Auric banished it. He was no longer worthy of such dreams. The outlands were his home now, this meager existence his penance. As night fell in earnest, Auric prepared for another restless sleep. But something in the air had changed. A faint whisper, barely perceptible, brushed against his consciousness. It spoke of shifting tides and approaching storms. Auric's eyes snapped open, his warrior's instincts suddenly alert. Something was coming. Whether threat or opportunity, he couldn't say. But for the first time in years, a spark of something long forgotten flickered in his chest. Hope, fragile as a candle's flame, dared to ignite in the heart of the fallen night. Chapter 2. The dawn broke reluctantly over the outlands, as if the sun itself hesitated to illuminate the stark landscape. Auric rose with the first light, a habit ingrained from years of military discipline that even exile couldn't erase. He donned his tarnished armor, each piece a weight not just on his body, but on his soul. As he emerged from his shelter, Auric's keen eyes scanned the horizon. Something was different. The air felt thicker, charged with an unseen energy that set his nerves on edge. In the distance, where the rocky hills gave way to the twilight forest, a faint haze lingered. Curiosity warred with caution in Auric's mind. He had sworn to remain apart from the world, to bear his shame in solitude. Yet the warrior in him could not ignore the sense of wrongness that permeated the morning. "Just a brief reconnaissance," he muttered, trying to convince himself as he set out toward the anomaly. As Auric approached the forest's edge, the haze resolved into tendrils of inky darkness that writhed and pulsed with malevolent life. The trees at the periphery stood half-consumed, their once vibrant leaves withered and blackened. By the light, Auric breathed, his hand instinctively reaching for his sword. The shadow plate. He had heard whispers of this corruption, even in his isolation. But to see it firsthand, to feel the creeping dread it exuded, was something else entirely. This was no natural phenomenon, but a calculated attack on the very fabric of the realm. A movement caught Auric's eye. From the corrupted underbrush emerged a figure, a deer, or what had once been a deer. Its form was twisted, antlers grotesquely overgrown, and eyes glowing with an unholy light. The creature fixed its gaze on Auric, and in that moment, he felt the full weight of the darkness behind it. Without thinking, Auric's body moved into a fighting stance, muscle memory taking over. The corrupted deer charged, its movements unnaturally swift and erratic. Auric's blade sang as it left its scabbard, meeting the creature's charge with a precision that belied his years of inaction. The battle was brief but fierce. As Auric's sword found its mark, the creature dissolved into wisps of shadow, leaving behind only a lingering sense of rawness. Panting slightly, Auric surveyed the area. The corruption seemed contained for now, but for how long? He thought of the Golden Kingdom, of the people he had once sworn to protect. Were they aware of this threat? Could the Sunlit Order stand against this encroaching darkness? For a moment, Auric felt a familiar warmth in his chest, the stirring of purpose, of duty. But it was quickly quashed by the cold reality of his situation. He was no longer a champion of the light. His interference would likely do more harm than good. As he turned to head back to his shelter, a glint of gold caught Auric's eye. There, half buried in the corrupted soil, lay a single feather that shimmered with celestial light. Auric hesitated, then carefully retrieved it, feeling a faint pulse of energy as his fingers closed around it. The feather was a sign, he realized. Whether of hope or doom, he couldn't say. But as Auric made his way back across the barren plain, his steps heavy with the knowledge of what he had witnessed, he knew that his days of isolation were numbered. The shadows were lengthening, reaching toward the heart of the realm. And despite his unworthiness, despite his shame, Auric felt the first stirrings of a call he had long thought silenced. The world was changing. And perhaps, just perhaps, so too must he. Chapter 3. Twilight painted the outlands in hues of amber and shadow as Auric paced the confines of his humble shelter. The golden feather lay on a makeshift table, its soft glow a stark contrast to the gloom that had settled over his dwelling and his heart. Sleep eluded him, his mind churning with memories of corrupted forest and twisted beasts. A sudden gust extinguished his meager fire, plunging the shelter into darkness. Auric's hand flew to his sword hilt, muscles tensing as he sensed a presence materializing from the shadows. "Who goes there?" he demanded, voice hoarse from disuse. "One who sees what was, what is, and what may yet be," came the reply, carried on a whisper of wind. From the darkness emerged a figure, tall and lean, wrapped in robes that seemed woven from starlight and shadow. Elder Soluz, the blind seer, stood before Auric, milky eyes somehow fixing upon the fallen knight with unnerving precision. "You've no business here, Elder," Auric growled, lowering his sword but maintaining his guard. "I left that life behind." Soluz tilted his head, a sad smile playing on his ancient features. "Did you, Sir Auric, or did you merely try to outrun it?" The words struck Auric like a physical blow. He turned away, unable to face the seer's sightless gaze. "I'm no longer worthy of that title. You waste your time here." "Time," Soluz mused, running gnarled fingers over the golden feather, "is a luxury the realm can ill afford. The balance tips, Auric. Surely you felt it. Unbidden, images of the shadow plague flashed through Auric's mind. He clenched his fists, fighting the surge of emotion threatening to overwhelm him. The Sunlit Order will handle it. They have other champions. Champions, yes, Saluz nodded, but not the one foretold. Auric's head snapped up, eyes narrowing. Speak plainly, old man. I've no patience for riddles. The seer's expression grew solemn. The prophecy of Twilight's end speaks of a warrior who walks between light and shadow, one who has known the heights of radiance and the depths of despair. No, Auric whispered, taking a step back. You can't mean. The cosmic scales teeter on the brink, Auric, Saluz pressed on. Noctis stirs in his dark realm, his ambitions threatening to shatter the celestial concordat. The realm needs its Twilight Champion. Auric's mind reeled. The weight of prophecy and expectation threatened to crush him anew. You're wrong, he insisted, voice cracking. I'm broken, tarnished. I'll only bring more ruin. Saluz moved with surprising swiftness, placing a hand on Auric's armored shoulder. It is in the cracks that the light shines through, young one. Your fall may yet be the key to your, and the realm's, salvation. As if summoned by the seer's words, a vision flashed before Auric's eyes. The golden kingdom in flames, shadow creatures roaming the streets, the radiant citadel crumbling. At its center stood a figure wreathed in darkness, golden eyes gleaming with malice. Auric gasped, staggering back. The vision faded, leaving him trembling. You see now, Saluz said softly. The choice lies before you, Sir Auric. Remain here, bound by past failures, or take up your true mantle and face the coming storm. The seer turned, moving towards the shelter's entrance. Seek the dawn star in the twilight forest, he called over his shoulder. Let its light guide you back to your path. With that, Elder Saluz vanished into the night, leaving only the faint scent of ozone in his wake. Auric stood motionless, his world upended once more. His gaze fell upon his tarnished armor, then to the golden feather still glowing softly on the table. The weight of destiny pressed down upon him, as heavy as the shame he'd carried for so long. Could he dare to hope for redemption? To believe that his greatest failure might lead to salvation? As the first light of dawn crept over the horizon, Auric made his decision. With shaking hands, he began to gather his meager possessions. The path ahead was shrouded in uncertainty, but one thing was clear. The exile of Sir Auric had come to an end. Chapter 4. The outlands faded behind Auric as he journeyed toward the twilight forest, each step carrying him further from exile and closer to an uncertain destiny. Night fell swiftly, and he made camp at the forest's edge, the looming trees a dark wall against the star-strewn sky. As Auric stared into the dying embers of his campfire, exhaustion finally overcame him. His eyes drifted shut, and the world dissolved into dreams. He found himself standing in a vast, ethereal space, where motes of light danced like fireflies in a sea of twilight. Before him materialized a figure of breathtaking radiance, radiant, the celestial being who had forged his armor an eternity ago. Auric, Radiant's voice resonated, neither male nor female, but a harmony of tones that stirred something long dormant in the fallen knight's soul. At last you heed the call. Auric fell to one knee, overwhelmed by Radiant's presence. I'm unworthy, he whispered, unable to meet the Celestial's gaze. Rise, champion, Radiant commanded gently. Your worth is not measured by your falls, but by your willingness to stand once more. As Auric stood, he noticed his armor had changed. The tarnish was gone, replaced by a soft, pulsing glow that seemed to come from within the metal itself. "Your path to redemption begins," Auric, radiant, continued, gesturing to the space around them. "But beware, it is fraught with peril. Noctis grows stronger, and the shadow plague spreads. The realm teeters on the brink of darkness." "How can I hope to stop it?" Auric asked, his voice tinged with doubt. "I'm just one man, and I've already failed once." Radiant's form shimmered, and suddenly Auric was surrounded by images, flashes of battles yet to come, allies yet to meet, and challenges yet to face. "You will not stand alone," Radiant assured him. "Seek out the 3 sacred relics. In them lies the power to restore balance. But remember, true strength comes not from artifacts, but from the light within." The celestial being reached out, touching Auric's breastplate. A warm glow spread through the armor, and Auric felt a surge of energy course through him. "I have rekindled the spark within your armor," Radiant explained. "Nurture it with acts of courage and compassion, and it will grow in time. You may yet shine as you once did." The dreamscape began to fade, Radiant's form becoming translucent. "Wait," Auric called out, reaching forward. "I have so many questions." "Trust in the light, Auric," Radiant's voice echoed as the vision dissolved. "Even in the darkest hour, it will guide you home." Auric's eyes snapped open, the first light of dawn painting the sky in pastel hues. He sat up, heart racing, the memory of the dream vivid in his mind. Looking down, he gasped. His armor, while still bearing the scars of his past, now emitted a faint, warm glow. As he broke camp and prepared to enter the twilight forest, Auric felt a mixture of trepidation and hope. The weight of his task was immense, but for the first time in years, he didn't feel crushed by it. The trees loomed before him, their leaves shimmering with an otherworldly light. Somewhere in their depths lay the Dawn Star, the first step on his path to redemption. Auric took a deep breath, squaring his shoulders. "Trust in the light," he murmured, echoing Radiant's words. Then, with renewed purpose, Sir Auric stepped into the shadows of the twilight forest, ready to face whatever challenges awaited him. The quest for the Twilight Champion had truly begun. Chapter 5. The twilight forest enveloped Auric in a symphony of light and shadow. Luminescent bark pulsed with an ethereal glow, while patches of inky darkness writhed between the trees. Each step felt like a negotiation between 2 worlds, mirroring the internal struggle within the fallen knight. As Auric pressed deeper into the forest, the whispers began. At first, he dismissed them as the rustling of leaves, but soon the voices became unmistakable, echoes of his past, both glorious and shameful. "Champion of light," one voice exulted. "Oathbreaker," another accused. Auric gritted his teeth, pressing on. The forest was testing him, he realized, forcing him to confront the duality of his nature. He was neither the paragon he once thought himself to be, nor the irredeemable failure he had believed himself in exile. A flicker of golden light caught his eye. There, nestled in the hollow of an ancient tree, lay the Dawn Star. Its radiance pulsed in time with the faint glow of Auric's armor, calling to him. As Auric reached for the relic, a shadow darted from the undergrowth. He spun, sword drawn in a fluid motion, to face a creature of pure darkness, a manifestation of the shadow plate. The battle was swift and fierce. Auric's blade, guided by muscle memory and renewed purpose, clashed against the shadow's claws. With each strike, flashes of light erupted from his armor, driving the creature back. In a final decisive move, Auric thrust his sword forward, channeling a burst of light through the blade. The shadow creature dissipated with a haunting wail, leaving behind only wisps of darkness that faded into the air. Panting, Auric turned back to the Dawnstar. As his hand closed around the relic, a surge of energy coursed through him. Visions flashed before his eyes, the Golden Kingdom, its spires dim, but not yet darkened, the radiant citadel, standing defiant against encroaching shadows. With a gasp, Auric returned to the present. The forest around him seemed brighter, the shadows less oppressive. He had taken the first step on his path to redemption, but the journey ahead remained long and perilous. Emerging from the twilight forest, Auric gazed upon the distant silhouette of the Golden Kingdom. How long had it been since he'd laid eyes on those once gleaming towers? The sight filled him with a complex mixture of longing, shame, and determination. As he approached the city gates, Auric steeled himself. The prodigal knight was returning, not in triumph, but seeking redemption. The guards' eyes widened in recognition, whispers spreading quickly through their ranks. "Sir Auric, the fallen paladin. Why has he returned?" Ignoring the murmurs, Auric addressed the captain of the guard, his voice steady despite his inner turmoil. "I seek audience with Lady Lumina. The realm is in grave danger." The captain hesitated, conflict evident in his eyes. Finally, he nodded. "Follow me, Sir Auric, but know that you return not to open arms. Much has changed in your absence." As Auric walked through the streets of the Golden Kingdom, he felt the weight of countless stares. The once vibrant city was muted, its people moving with a wariness that spoke of growing fears. Shadows lurked in corners where light once reigned supreme, a testament to the encroaching darkness. The radiant citadel loomed ahead, its gleaming towers a defiant beacon against the dimming sky. Auric's heart raced as he climbed the steps, memories of his fall threatening to overwhelm him. At the top, framed by the grand entrance to the Chamber of Illumination, stood Lady Lumina. Her expression was unreadable, but her eyes held a mixture of sorrow, hope, and something else, a desperate need that made Auric's renewed purpose solidify within him. "Sir Auric," Lady Lumina's voice carried the weight of her position and the trials of recent years. "You have returned to us in our darkest hour. The question remains, as savior or harbinger?" Auric knelt, drawing the Dawnstar from his pouch. Its light pulsed in harmony with the faint glow of his armor, casting back the encroaching shadows. "My lady," Auric said, his voice firm with newfound resolve, "I return seeking neither glory nor absolution. I come as a servant of the light, ready to face the coming storm." As the Dawnstar's radiance washed over the Chamber of Illumination, Auric felt the first true stirring of hope. His journey of redemption had only just begun, but here, in the heart of the Golden Kingdom, the Twilight Champion took his first step towards fulfilling his destiny. The balance of light and shadow trembled, and the fate of the realm hung in the balance. Chapter 7. The dawn broke over the radiant citadel, painting its spires in hues of gold and rose. For Auric, standing at the threshold of the trial grounds, the beauty was tinged with trepidation. The luminous trials awaited, a gauntlet of challenges that would test not just his martial prowess, but the very essence of his being. Lady Lumina's voice rang out, clear and commanding. "Sir Auric, you stand before us seeking redemption through trial. Know that these tests will strip you bare, exposing your truest self to the light. Are you prepared?" Auric met her gaze, his resolve unwavering. "I am, my lady." With a nod from Lady Lumina, the first trial began. The ground beneath Auric's feet shimmered, transforming into a perfect reflection of the sky above. He found himself suspended between two realms, each step precarious. The trial of balance, Elder Sullus intoned from the sidelines. Navigate the path between light and shadow, for only in equilibrium can true strength be found. Auric took a tentative step forward, feeling the surface shift beneath him. With each movement, the reflective ground rippled, revealing glimpses of his past, moments of triumph intertwined with his greatest failures. He saw himself standing proudly as he was first inducted into the Sunlit Order, the memory overlaid with the shame of his exile. The joy of saving a village from marauders flickered alongside the anguish of lives lost in the sundered valley. Auric's breath caught in his throat, the weight of his history threatening to overwhelm him. But as he teetered on the edge of despair, he remembered Radiant's words, "Trust in the light." Closing his eyes, Auric centered himself. He accepted the darkness of his past without letting it consume him, acknowledged his light without letting it blind him to his flaws. With each carefully measured step, he found his balance. As he reached the other side of the trial ground, the reflective surface faded, leaving him standing on solid stone once more. A murmur of appreciation rippled through the onlookers. "Well done," Captain Pharaoh grudgingly admitted. "But don't get cocky, the next trial won't be so easily overcome by pretty footwork." No sooner had the words left Pharaoh's mouth than the air around Auric began to shimmer. Spectral forms materialized, shadow creatures intermingled with corrupted beings that bore a chilling resemblance to the twisted deer he'd encountered in the Outlands. "The trial of resolve," Lady Lumina announced. "Face the encroaching darkness, Sir Auric. Show us the strength of your conviction." The shadow creatures surged forward, their attacks a blur of claws and fangs. Auric's sword sang as he met their charge, each strike precise and purposeful. But for every foe he felled, two more seemed to take its place. As the battle raged, Auric felt a familiar temptation rising within him, the urge to call upon the full might of his celestial power, to unleash a nova of purifying light that would obliterate his enemies. It was this very impulse that had led to his downfall in the Sundered Valley, the collateral damage too great to bear. Gritting his teeth, Auric resisted. Instead, he focused on the faint glow emanating from his armor. With each measured strike, with each defensive maneuver that protected both himself and the spectators, the glow intensified. Slowly, methodically, Auric pushed back the tide of darkness. His blade became a beacon, each swing leaving trails of light that lingered, forming barriers against the shadow creature's advances. When the last foe dissipated, Auric stood at the center of a web of luminescence, panting but unbowed. Elder Sullus nodded approvingly. He understands now true strength lies not in overwhelming force, but in the judicious application of light. Lady Lumina stepped forward, her expression inscrutable. "You have passed the first two trials, Sir Auric, but the greatest challenge yet remains. Prepare yourself for the trial of truth." As the trial grounds shifted once more, Auric steeled himself. He had faced his past and his foes. Now he would have to confront something far more daunting, himself. The air shimmered, and a figure materialized before him. Auric's eyes widened in shock as he found himself face to face with himself. But this doppelganger was resplendent in untarnished armor, radiating pure celestial light. It was the idealized version of himself, the paragon he had once aspired to be. "Show us, Sir Auric," Lady Lumina's voice seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, "who you truly are." As Auric raised his sword, the true nature of his redemption hanging in the balance, the radiant citadel held its breath. The final trial had begun. Chapter 8. The clash of steel against steel rang out across the trial grounds as Auric faced his idealized self. Each strike from his doppelganger was perfection incarnate, a reminder of the impossible standard he had once set for himself. Auric parried and countered, his movements a fusion of hard-won experience and newfound humility. As they fought, the world around them began to shift. The radiant citadel melted away, replaced by a kaleidoscope of scenes from across the realm. Auric found himself battling through the mist-shrouded spires of the Twilight Isles, the ever-changing landscape forcing him to adapt with each step. "Behold the realm you seek to protect," Elder Salus's voice echoed from everywhere and nowhere. "Understand its complexities, its light and shadow." The scene changed again. Now they clashed amidst the phosphorescent fungi of Gloomhaven, the underground city's eerie glow casting strange shadows. Auric felt the pull of darkness here, a temptation to give in to despair. But he pushed through, his armor's faint light a beacon in the gloom. "The shadow plague spreads," Lady Lumina's voice intoned, as wisps of corruption seeped from the walls. "Will you be its conqueror or its victim?" Auric's doppelganger pressed the attack, its radiance almost blinding in the darkness of Gloomhaven. But Auric stood his ground, realizing that pure, uncompromising light was as much a danger here as the deepest shadow. He tempered his strikes, finding balance between illumination and acceptance of the dark. The world shifted once more, and they were atop Mount Solaris. The thin air and biting cold tested Auric's endurance as he fended off his opponent's relentless assault. Here, closer to the heavens, Auric felt the weight of divine judgment upon him. "The celestial concordat hangs in the balance." A new voice joined the chorus radiance, harmonious tones carrying on the wind. "Remember, Twilight Champion, that true strength lies in unity, not division." Understanding dawned on Auric. This trial wasn't about defeating his idealized self, but reconciling with it. With a supreme effort, he locked blades with his doppelganger, staring into eyes that mirrored his own. "I am not you," Auric declared, his voice steady. "But neither am I your antithesis. I am the balance between what was and what could be." The air around them shimmered, and suddenly they were back in the trial grounds of the radiant citadel. Auric's doppelganger smiled a gesture of acceptance, rather than victory, before fading away in motes of light that settled on Auric's armor, causing it to glow brighter than ever before. As the light subsided, Auric found himself alone in the center of the trial grounds, surrounded by the astonished faces of the Sunlit Order. Lady Lumina stepped forward, her expression a mixture of awe and cautious hope. "You have passed the luminous trials, Sir Auric," she announced, her voice carrying across the hushed assembly. "But more than that, you have shown us a new path, one that embraces both light and shadow." Captain Pharaoh approached, his earlier skepticism replaced by grudging respect. "Well fought, Twilight Champion. It seems the realm has found its defender after all." As the implications of his triumph settled over the gathering, Auric felt a shift in the air. The Dawn Star, still in Lady Lumina's possession, pulsed with renewed energy, resonating with Auric's armor. Elder Solus stepped forward, his unseeing eyes somehow finding Auric. "The first step on your true journey has been taken, Sir Auric, but the path ahead is fraught with peril. The cosmic scales teeter on the brink, and Nocti's power grows with each passing day." Auric nodded solemnly, the weight of his responsibility settling on his shoulders. He had been tested and forged anew, but the real challenges lay ahead. The protection of the realm, the quest for the remaining sacred relics, and the confrontation with Noctis loomed on the horizon. As the assembly dispersed, preparing for the trials to come, Auric gazed out over the Golden Kingdom. The city seemed a little brighter now, hope rekindled in the hearts of its people. But beyond its borders, shadows deepened, and whispers of a growing darkness carried on the wind. The Twilight Champion had risen. Now the true battle for the fate of the realm would begin. Chapter 9. The golden light of dawn had barely touched the spires of the radiant citadel when the alarm bells began to toll. Auric, newly christened as the Twilight Champion, rushed to the ramparts, his armor gleaming with its rekindled purpose. What he saw below made his blood run cold. A seething mass of shadows roiled at the city's edge, tendrils of darkness probing the ancient wards that had protected the Golden Kingdom for centuries. At its center stood a figure that radiated malevolence, Lord Cinder, once a noble of the realm, now twisted by the shadow plague. "So, the fallen knight returns," Lord Cinder's voice carried unnaturally across the distance, dripping with disdain. "Come to play hero once more, Auric." Lady Lumina appeared at Auric's side, her face grim. "We've been expecting an attack, but not so soon. Noctis grows bold." Auric's hand tightened on the hilt of his sword. "This is my fault. My return has forced their hand." "No," Lady Lumina countered firmly. "This was inevitable, but now we have hope." She pressed the Dawn Star into Auric's hand. "Use it wisely, Twilight Champion. The city's fate rests in your hands." With a nod, Auric vaulted over the ramparts, using pulses of light from his armor to slow his descent. As his feet touched the ground outside the city walls, he felt the oppressive weight of the encroaching darkness. Lord Cinder laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Ah, the prodigal son approaches. Tell me, Auric, do you think your shiny new title will protect you from the stain of your past?" Auric stood tall, the Dawn Star pulsing in rhythm with his heartbeat. "I carry my past with me, Cinder. It is my strength, not my weakness." With a snarl, Lord Cinder launched his attack. Shadow creatures surged forward, their forms twisting and reforming as they advanced. Auric met them head-on, his blade a blur of light that cut through the darkness. But for every shadow he dispelled, two more took its place. Auric found himself being pushed back, the sheer weight of numbers threatening to overwhelm him. "You fight well," Lord Cinder taunted, hanging back from the fray. "But surely you realize the futility. The shadow plague cannot be stopped. It is evolution, Auric. The strong survive, while the weak—" He gestured at the city behind them. "The weak perish." Auric gritted his teeth, feeling the fatigue setting in. He had to find a way to turn the tide, to reach Cinder himself. But how? As if in answer to his unspoken question, a voice cut through the chaos. "Auric, the Dawn Star, use it with your armor." It was Captain Pharaoh, standing atop the city walls, his gruff voice carrying a note of urgent hope. Understanding flashed through Auric's mind. He raised the Dawn Star high, focusing his will through it and into his armor. The glow intensified, spreading outward in a wave of purifying light. Shadow creatures recoiled and dissipated, unable to withstand the radiance. But Auric noticed something else where the light touched the corrupted ground. Small shoots of green began to emerge. The land itself was responding, fighting back against the plague. Lord Cinder howled in rage and pain, his form flickering as the light washed over him. "This changes nothing," he roared. "The darkness will return, stronger than ever." With a final surge of will, Auric pushed the light to its limits. Lord Cinder, still shouting defiance, retreated into a portal of swirling shadow, leaving behind a battlefield cleansed of his corrupting influence. As the last of the shadow creatures faded away, Auric sank to one knee, exhausted but victorious. The citizens of the Golden Kingdom cheered from the walls, hope rekindled in their hearts. Lady Lumina approached, her expression a mixture of relief and concern. "You've won us a reprieve, Twilight Champion." but this was merely the opening move in a much larger game. Auric nodded, climbing wearily to his feet. Cinder was right about one thing: the Shadow Plague will return. We need to take the fight to its source. Agreed, Lady Lumina said. But first you must complete your quest for the Sacred Relics. The Twilight Blade calls from the Twilight Isles. As Auric looked out over the land beyond the city, he saw patches of green where once there had been only corruption. It was a small victory, but a significant one. The balance could be restored with patience, perseverance, and sacrifice. The Twilight Champion had faced his first true test and emerged stronger. But as the sun climbed higher in the sky, Auric knew that greater challenges lay ahead. The shadow of Noctis loomed on the horizon, and the fate of the realm hung in the balance. With renewed determination, Auric turned back to the Radiant Citadel. There was much to prepare for the journey ahead. Chapter 10. The Radiant Citadel hummed with activity as preparations for Auric's journey to the Twilight Isles were underway. Yet, amidst the bustle, the Twilight Champion found himself drawn to the quietest corners of the ancient fortress. Something called to him, a whisper on the edge of consciousness. Following this enigmatic pull, Auric descended into the depths of the citadel, two chambers long forgotten by most. The air grew thick with dust and memory as he ventured deeper, his armor's soft glow the only illumination in the gloom. At last, he came upon a door adorned with intricate engravings, a perfect balance of light and shadow intertwined. The dawn star pulsed at his hip, resonating with whatever lay beyond. You hear it too, don't you? Auric whirled, sword half drawn, to find Elder Saluz standing behind him, a knowing smile on his wizened face. What is this place? Auric asked, lowering his weapon. Saluz ran a gnarled hand over the engravings. This, Twilight Champion, is the Chamber of Echoes. Few know of its existence, fewer still of its true purpose. With a gesture from the elder, the door swung open silently. Inside, Auric beheld a circular room, its walls covered in shimmering, ever-shifting murals. At its center stood a pedestal, upon which rested an object shrouded in cloth. The Twilight Codex, Saluz intoned solemnly. Or rather, a fragment of it. The complete tome has been lost to time, its knowledge scattered across the realm. Auric approached the pedestal, drawn by an inexorable force. As his hand hovered over the shrouded object, visions flashed before his eyes, glimpses of battles yet to come, of shadows deepening and light fading. Be warned, Saluz cautioned. The knowledge contained within is as dangerous as it is powerful. Are you prepared for what you might learn? Steeling himself, Auric nodded and removed the cloth. Beneath lay a book of indeterminate age, its cover a swirling mix of light and shadow that seemed to move of its own accord. The moment Auric's fingers touched the codex, a surge of energy coursed through him. The chamber around him faded, replaced by a kaleidoscope of images and sensations. He saw the creation of the realm, the delicate balance struck between light and shadow. He witnessed the fall of Noctis, once a being of pure radiance, now consumed by bitterness and darkness. And he beheld the true nature of the Shadow Plague, not merely a corruption, but a twisted reflection of creation itself. But amidst the flood of knowledge, one revelation stood out above all others. The Twilight Champion was more than just a title or a prophecy. It was a mantle passed down through ages, a legacy of those who walked the line between light and shadow. And Auric was not the first to bear it. As the vision faded, Auric found himself back in the Chamber of Echoes, gasping for breath. Elder Saluz steadied him, concern etched on his face. What did you see? the old seer asked. Auric's mind reeled, struggling to process the influx of information. I'm not the first, am I? There have been others who bore this title. Solus nodded gravely. The Twilight Champion rises when the balance is most threatened, but knowledge of past champions has been lost or suppressed. Some feared the power they wielded. And now? Auric asked, a new weight settling on his shoulders. Now, Solus replied, you must forge your own path. The knowledge you've gained is but a fragment. The full truth and power of the Twilight Champion still lies scattered across the realm. Auric's gaze fell upon the Codex fragment. This changes everything. The quest for the Sacred Relics, the fight against Noctis, it's all connected. Indeed, Solus agreed. But remember, Auric, knowledge is a double-edged sword. Use it wisely and guard it carefully. There are those who would stop at nothing to possess the secrets you now hold. As they ascended from the depths of the radiant citadel, Auric felt the enormity of his task settling upon him. He was not just fighting for the realm's future, but carrying the legacy of countless champions before him. The journey to the Twilight Isles now held new significance. It was not just a quest for a sacred relic, but a step towards uncovering the full truth of his destiny and the true nature of the conflict that threatened to consume the realm. As the light of day greeted them, Auric squared his shoulders. The path ahead was shrouded in mystery, fraught with danger. But for the first time since taking up the mantle of Twilight Champion, he felt truly prepared for the challenges that lay ahead. The balance between light and shadow trembled, and Auric stood at its center, ready to face whatever came next. Chapter 11. The sea of liquid starlight churned beneath the bow of the ship as it approached the Twilight Isles. Auric stood at the prow, the dawn star pulsing softly at his hip, in harmony with the ethereal waters below. The knowledge gained from the Twilight Codex fragment weighed heavily on his mind, adding new layers of complexity to his quest. Captain Pharaoh, who had insisted on accompanying Auric on this journey, joined him at the railing. "We're nearly there," he grunted, eyeing the shimmering archipelago ahead. "Though I can't say I like the look of those islands. They seem to shift with every glance." Auric nodded, understanding the captain's unease. The Twilight Isles existed in a state of flux, caught between realms. As they drew closer, he could make out ruins of an advanced civilization peeking through the mists, their architecture a blend of light and shadow. As their ship docked at a pier that seemed to materialize from the mist itself, Auric sensed a presence, or rather, two presences, perfectly balanced yet distinct. "Welcome, Twilight Champion," two voices spoke in unison as figures emerged from the fog. "We are Ava and Dusk, guardians of this realm between realms." The Twilight twins stood before them, mirror images of each other, one radiant as the dawn, the other dark as deepest night. Their eyes, however, were identical swirling vortexes of cosmic energy that seemed to peer into Auric's very soul. "You seek the Twilight Blade," Ava spoke, her voice like chiming bells. "But are you prepared for the price it demands?" Dusk finished, his tone a somber counterpoint. Auric stepped forward, feeling the weight of destiny upon him. "I am prepared to do whatever is necessary to restore balance to the realm." The twins exchanged a look that seemed to contain volumes of unspoken communication. Finally, they nodded in unison. "Follow us," they said together, turning to lead the way into the heart of the island. As they traversed the ever-shifting landscape, Auric and Pharaoh witnessed wonders beyond imagination. Waterfalls of light that flowed upwards, forests where the trees phased in and out of existence, and ruins that told stories of a civilization that had mastered the art of existing between worlds. At last, they came to a clearing where reality seemed to fold in upon itself. At its center floated the Twilight Blade, a weapon of impossible beauty and terrifying power. The blade is both key and lock, Ava explained. It can sever the bonds between worlds, Dusk continued. Or unite them, they finished in unison. Auric reached out, feeling the blade call to him. But as his fingers neared its hilt, a searing pain shot through his mind. Visions assaulted him, not of the future, but of the past. He saw previous Twilight Champions wielding the blade, each facing a moment of terrible choice. And then, with horrifying clarity, he understood the true nature of the conflict between light and shadow. Gasping, Auric stumbled back, his eyes wide with the weight of revelation. "It's not about destroying the darkness," he whispered. "It never was." Captain Pharaoh looked at him in confusion. "What are you talking about?" Auric turned to the Twilight twins, seeing understanding in their cosmic eyes. "The balance. It's not about eliminating one side or the other, it's about integration, isn't it? Light and shadow, existing in harmony." The twins nodded solemnly. "You begin to understand," they said. "But then," Auric continued, his mind racing, "Noctis, he's not trying to plunge the world into darkness, he's trying to force an evolution," Ava said softly. "To merge light and shadow by force," Dusk finished. The revelation hit Auric like a physical blow. Everything he thought he knew about his quest, about the nature of the conflict, had been turned on its head. The Sunlit Order, in its zeal to protect the light, had been perpetuating the very imbalance they sought to prevent. "The Twilight Blade," Auric said, looking at the weapon with new understanding. "It's not just a weapon against darkness, it's a tool for unification." The twins nodded. "But wielding it comes at a great cost," they warned. "Are you prepared to pay the price, Twilight Champion?" Auric stood at the precipice of a choice that would alter the course of the realm. The path forward was no longer clear, the line between ally and enemy blurred. As he reached for the Twilight Blade, he knew that nothing would ever be the same. The true nature of his quest had been revealed, and with it, the staggering responsibility of bringing true balance to a world divided. As his hand closed around the hilt of the Twilight Blade, Auric felt the weight of countless ages settle upon his shoulders. The midpoint of his journey had arrived, and with it a twist of fate that would reshape the very foundations of his quest. The battle for the realm's future had only just begun. Chapter 12. The return journey from the Twilight Isles was marked by a profound silence. Auric stood at the ship's stern, the Twilight Blade secured at his hip opposite the Dawn Star, their energies pulsing in an uneasy harmony. Captain Pharaoh watched him from afar, concern etched on his weathered face. As the ship cut through the sea of liquid starlight, Auric's mind churned with the revelations from the Twilight Isles. The true nature of the conflict, the misguided efforts of the Sunlit Order, and the staggering responsibility now resting on his shoulders weighed heavily upon him. "You look like a man who's seen the edge of the world," Pharaoh finally said, approaching Auric, "and didn't much like what he found there." Auric turned to the captain, seeing not the gruff skeptic who had doubted him, but a potential ally in the trials to come. "Everything we thought we knew, Pharaoh. It's all been built on a misunderstanding." As Auric explained what he had learned, Pharaoh's expression shifted from disbelief to grudging acceptance. "By the light," he muttered. "If what you say is true, we've been fighting the wrong battle all along." "Not wrong," Auric corrected, "but incomplete. We've been trying to vanquish the darkness when we should have been seeking to understand it." Pharaoh nodded slowly, his tactical mind already considering the implications. The Order won't like this. They've built their entire existence around combating shadow. Which is why I'll need allies, Auric said, meeting Pharaoh's gaze. People willing to see beyond the black and white, to walk the twilight path. A moment of understanding passed between them. Pharaoh extended his hand, which Auric clasped firmly. You've got me, Twilight Champion, for whatever that's worth. As the shores of the Golden Kingdom came into view, Auric felt a shift within himself. The doubt and shame that had plagued him since his fall had been replaced by a newfound resolve. He was no longer seeking redemption for past failures, but forging a new path toward a future of true balance. The radiant citadel loomed before them, its spires gleaming in the light of the setting sun. As they disembarked, Auric sensed a tension in the air, an unease that seemed to permeate the very stones of the fortress. Lady Lumina met them at the docks, her face a mask of concern. Twilight Champion, we have a situation while you were away. We received word from the Shadowfen Lord Cinder has resurfaced, and he's not alone. Auric's hand instinctively went to the Twilight Blade. Noctis? Lumina shook her head. No, but almost as concerning, Umbra, the Shadow Assassin, has joined forces with Cinder. They're amassing an army at the edge of our borders. The news should have filled Auric with dread, but instead, he felt a strange calm settle over him. Then it's time we changed our approach, he said. Gather the Order. There's much we need to discuss. As they made their way to the Chamber of Illumination, Auric felt the Twilight Blade and Dawnstar resonating, their energies intertwining in a way that mirrored the balance he now sought to achieve. The chamber fell silent as Auric entered, all eyes upon him. He could see the questions, the doubts, the fear in their faces. But he also saw hope, a desperate yearning for guidance in uncertain times. Taking a deep breath, Auric began to speak. He told them of the Twilight Isles, of the true nature of the conflict, and of the path that lay before them. As he spoke, he could see the shock and disbelief on their faces slowly give way to understanding. We've been fighting shadows, Auric concluded, when we should have been embracing them. The path forward isn't through destruction, but through unity. A murmur ran through the assembled knights. Lady Lumina stepped forward, her expression unreadable. What you propose goes against everything the Sunlit Order has stood for. How can we be certain this isn't a trick of the shadow? In answer, Auric drew both the Twilight Blade and the Dawnstar. As he held them aloft, their energies swirled together, creating a display of light and shadow that danced across the chamber. This is the true power we must wield, Auric declared. Not light obliterating darkness, nor shadow swallowing light, but both in harmony, strengthening each other. The chamber was silent for a long moment. Then, slowly, Captain Pharaoh stepped forward. I've seen what he's seen, he said gruffly. Felt what he's felt. If there's even a chance he's right, we owe it to the realm to try. One by one, others began to voice their support. Not all were convinced, but enough saw the wisdom in Auric's words to tip the balance. Lady Lumina, seeing the shift in her order, turned to Auric with newfound respect. It seems the Twilight Champion has truly come into his own, she said. Very well, Auric, lead us on this new path. Show us how to bring true balance to the realm. As the meeting adjourned, Auric felt a surge of hope. The road ahead would be difficult, fraught with danger and uncertainty. But he was no longer alone. With allies old and new at his side, with the power of both light and shadow at his command, he was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The Twilight Champion had taken a crucial step in his journey. Now it was time to put his newfound understanding to the test. The battle for the realm's future was about to enter a new phase, and Auric stood ready to lead the charge into the twilight. Chapter 13. The radiant citadel hummed with an energy unlike anything it had known in centuries. Knights of the Sunlit Order, once steadfast in their singular devotion to light, now grappled with the complexities of shadow. Auric stood at the center of this transformation, a beacon of twilight in a world accustomed to stark contrasts. But even as understanding grew within the citadel's walls, darkness gathered at its borders. Reports flowed in from across the realm, each more dire than the last. The shadow plague advanced with renewed vigor, twisting the land and its inhabitants into grotesque reflections of their former selves. Auric pored over maps in the war room, the twilight blade and dawn star pulsing at his hips, a constant reminder of the balance he sought to achieve. Captain Pharaoh and Lady Lumina flanked him, their faces etched with concern. Cinder's forces grow stronger by the day, Pharaoh growled, pointing to markers on the map. And with Umbra at his side, their strikes are precise, devastating. Lady Lumina nodded gravely. Our outer settlements are falling, one by one. The people cry out for protection, but our resources are stretched thin. Auric's jaw clenched as he surveyed the dire situation. The knowledge he had gained, the power he now wielded it all meant nothing if he couldn't protect those who needed it most. We need to change our strategy, he declared, his voice carrying the weight of his newfound purpose. Defending isn't enough. We must take the fight to them, show them the power of true balance. As if in response to his words, a commotion erupted outside the war room. The doors burst open, revealing a young squire, his face pale with urgency. My lords, my lady, he gasped. The Shadowfen, it's on the move. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. The Shadowfen, that vast swamp consumed by creeping darkness, had always been a blight on the realm. But it had remained largely stationary, a festering wound that didn't spread. Until now. Auric's mind raced. This was Nocti's hand at work. He was sure of it. The fallen angel was forcing their hand, escalating the conflict to new heights. Prepare for departure, Auric commanded, his voice ringing with authority. We ride for the edge of the Shadowfen at dawn. As the war room erupted into activity, Auric felt a presence at his side. Elder Sulus materialized from the shadows, his blind eyes somehow finding Auric's. You understand what this means, don't you, Twilight Champion? The old seer asked softly. Auric nodded grimly. Noctis is done playing games. He's making his move for the cosmic scales. Indeed, Sulus agreed. But remember, young one in darkness, stars shine brightest. This escalation may be the very thing needed to awaken the full power of the Twilight Champion. As preparations for the journey were made, Auric retreated to a quiet corner of the citadel. He unsheathed the twilight blade, its edge shimmering with potential. Closing his eyes, he reached out with his senses, feeling the currents of light and shadow that flowed through the realm. There, at the edge of perception, he felt it a pulse of power, ancient and terrible. The eclipse mantle, the final sacred relic, called to him from the depths of the Shadowfen. Its recovery would complete the trinity of artifacts, unlocking power beyond imagining. But as Auric opened his eyes, doubt crept in. Was he truly ready for such power? Could he wield it without falling into the same traps that had ensnared Noctis? A hand on his shoulder startled him from his reverie. Captain Pharaoh stood there, his gruff features softened by understanding. I may not understand all this twilight business, the old soldier said, but I know a leader when I see one. Whatever comes, you won't face it alone. Auric felt a surge of gratitude for his unlikely ally. He was no longer the isolated fallen knight, but a champion surrounded by those who believed in his cause. As the first light of dawn broke over the horizon, Auric stood at the gates of the radiant citadel. Behind him, an army unlike any the realm had seen before, knights of light and shadow, united under the banner of Twilight. Before them lay a journey into the heart of corruption, a confrontation with forces that sought to tear the world asunder. The Twilight Champion raised the Twilight blade high, its edge catching the first rays of sunlight. "For balance," he cried, his voice carrying across the assembled forces. "For the realm." The answering roar shook the very foundations of the citadel. As they set out, Auric felt the weight of destiny upon his shoulders. The challenges ahead were greater than any he had faced, the stakes higher than ever before. But as he rode at the head of his army, the Dawn Star and Twilight blade humming with power at his sides, Auric knew that this was what he had been prepared for all along. The true test of the Twilight Champion was about to begin. Chapter 14. The Shadowfen loomed before them, a writhing mass of corruption that seemed to devour the very light around it. Auric's army had made camp at its borders, an island of twilight in a sea of encroaching darkness. As night fell, an oppressive silence settled over the camp, broken only by the occasional hiss of mist rising from the fetid swamp. Auric stood alone at the edge of the camp, his eyes fixed on the twisted landscape before him. The Twilight blade hung heavy at his hip, its power a constant hum against his consciousness. The Dawn Star pulsed in counterpoint, a rhythm that should have been reassuring, but now only added to the chaos in his mind. "Copper for your thoughts, Twilight Champion?" Lady Lumina's voice cut through his reverie. Auric turned to find her standing beside him, her usual radiance dimmed by the oppressive atmosphere of the Shadowfen. "I'm not sure my thoughts are worth even that much right now," Auric replied, a wry smile not quite reaching his eyes. Lumina's gaze softened with understanding. "Doubt is not weakness, Auric. It is the whetstone upon which conviction is sharpened." Auric sighed, finally giving voice to the turmoil within him. What if we're wrong? What if this quest for balance is just another form of hubris? We could be leading everyone to their doom. As if in response to his words, a tendril of shadow snaked out from the swamp, withering the grass at their feet. Auric's hand instinctively went to the Twilight blade, but he hesitated, the weight of his responsibility paralyzing him for a crucial moment. Lumina acted without hesitation, a burst of pure light from her palm dispelling the shadowy tendril. But the effort seemed to drain her, and she stumbled slightly. "You see," Auric said, steadying her, "even your light wanes in the face of this corruption. How can I ask our forces to march into that?" "Because we must," came a gruff voice from behind them. Captain Pharaoh approached, his scarred face set in grim determination. "This isn't about what we want. It's about what needs to be done." Auric looked between his two allies, feeling the weight of their trust and expectations. "And what if I'm not the one to do it? What if I'm not the Twilight Champion the prophecy speaks of?" A soft chuckle drew their attention. Elder Saluz emerged from the shadows, his blind eyes somehow conveying amusement. "My dear boy, do you think the mantle of Twilight Champion is bestowed upon those who are certain? It is doubt that drives us to question, to seek balance not just in the world, but within ourselves." The old seer's words struck a chord in Auric. He thought back to the visions he had seen in the Twilight Codex, of past champions facing their own moments of crisis. "The eclipse mantle lies within the heart of the Shadowfen," Saluz continued. "It calls to you, does it not?" Auric nodded, feeling the pull of the final sacred relic like a physical force. "But what if claiming it only brings more destruction? the power of all three relics together is precisely what is needed to face Noctis and restore true balance, Lumina finished for him. Pharaoh placed a calloused hand on Auric's shoulder. You're not alone in this, lad. We've come this far together, and we'll see it through to the end. As Auric looked at the faces of his companions, Lumina's unwavering faith, Pharaoh's steadfast loyalty, Saluz's ancient wisdom, he felt something shift within him. His doubt didn't vanish, but it transformed, becoming not a burden, but a guide. You're right, he said, straightening his posture. Doubt isn't the enemy, it's what keeps us from becoming what we fight against. With newfound resolve, Auric drew the twilight blade. Its edge caught the dim light, seeming to absorb both shadow and illumination. He raised it high, and as he did, the dawn star at his hip pulsed in harmony. We march at dawn, he declared, his voice carrying across the camp. Not as conquerors, but as seekers of balance, we go to face the darkness, not to destroy it, but to understand it, to bring it into harmony with the light. A ripple of determination spread through the gathered forces. Knights of light and shadow alike stood taller, bolstered by their leader's words. As the army prepared for the challenges that lay ahead, Auric turned his gaze once more to the Shadowfang. The corrupted landscape still loomed ominous and forbidding, but now he saw it with new eyes. Within its twisted depths lay not just danger, but opportunity, a chance to prove the power of twilight, of balance. The doubt hadn't left him entirely, but Auric now understood its value. It would keep him vigilant, remind him of the cost of failure, and drive him to find solutions where others saw only obstacles. The Twilight Champion had faced his internal demons and emerged stronger. As the first light of dawn broke over the horizon, Auric stood ready to lead his forces into the heart of darkness, carrying with him the hope of a realm hanging in the balance. Chapter 15. The fetid air of the Shadowfang pressed in around them as Auric led his forces deeper into the corrupted swamp. Each step was a battle against the very land itself, which seemed to resist their presence with malevolent intent. Yet, amidst the gloom, the Twilight Champion's armor glowed with a soft, reassuring light, neither the blinding radiance of pure celestial power nor the consuming darkness of shadow, but a perfect balance of both. As they pressed forward, Auric felt the pull of the eclipse mantle growing stronger. But he also sensed something else, a presence that defied the corruption around them, a pocket of resistance in the heart of the Shadowfang. Hold, Auric commanded, raising his hand. The army came to a stop, an island of twilight in a sea of shadow. There's something ahead, something different. Captain Pharaoh squinted into the murk. Different how? More of Cinder's tricks? Auric shook his head. No, I'm not sure, but I think we need to investigate. Lady Lumina stepped forward, her brow furrowed in concentration. I sense it too, a spark of light, but not like ours. It's wild, untamed. With a nod to his companions, Auric led a small group off the main path, following the strange sensation. As they pushed through the twisted vegetation, the air began to clear, the oppressive miasma of the Shadowfang giving way to something fresher, more vital. They emerged into a clearing unlike anything they had seen in the swamp. Here, the corruption seemed held at bay by an invisible barrier. At the center stood an ancient tree, its bark glowing with symbols that pulse with an otherworldly light. And there, perched on one of its massive roots, sat a figure that made Auric's eyes widen in recognition. Whisper, he breathed, remembering the mischievous forest spirit from his journey through the Twilight Forest. The fey creature grinned, a sparkle in its eyes that seemed to dance between light and shadow. Well met, Twilight Champion. You've come a long way since last we crossed paths. Auric approached cautiously, aware of the unpredictable nature of the Fae. What are you doing here, Whisper? This is no place for a creature of the forest. Whisper's smile turned enigmatic. Is it not? The Shadowfen was not always as you see it now. Once, it was a place of balance, where light and shadow danced in perfect harmony. The implications of Whisper's words struck Auric like a physical blow. You mean? Yes, the spirit nodded. This corruption is not natural. It is a perversion of the true nature of shadow, and there are those who remember the old ways, who resist Noctis's twisted vision. As if on cue, figures began to emerge from the surrounding trees. Beings of shadow, yet not corrupted like the minions of Cinder. These were the Shadowkin, creatures native to the darkness before the sundering. One stepped forward, its form flickering between solid and ethereal. I am Shade, leader of the Twilight Resistance. We've been waiting for you, Twilight Champion. Auric's mind raced with the possibilities this presented. Here, in the heart of enemy territory, he had found unexpected allies. You oppose Noctis? He asked. Shade nodded, its voice a whisper of wind through leaves. We remember the time before the schism, when light and shadow existed in balance. What Noctis seeks is not evolution, but domination. We would see true harmony restored. Lady Lumina stepped forward, her expression a mixture of wonder and wariness. Can we trust them, Auric? They are beings of shadow, after all. Auric turned to her, a newfound understanding in his eyes. That's exactly why we must trust them. This is what we've been fighting for, not the eradication of shadow, but its integration. They are living proof that balance is possible. Captain Pharaoh grunted in grudging agreement. Aye, and we could use the help. Fighting through this swamp is like wading through tar. Whisper clapped its hands in delight. Oh, this is going to be fun. The Twilight Champion, leading an army of light and shadow against the forces of imbalance. The bards will sing of this for ages. Auric couldn't help but smile at the spirit's enthusiasm. He turned to Shade, extending his hand in a gesture of alliance. We would be honored to have you fight alongside us. Your knowledge of the Shadowfen could be invaluable. Shade's form solidified as it clasped Auric's hand. And your understanding of true balance may be the key to saving us all. As the Twilight Resistance merged with Auric's forces, he felt a surge of hope. The path ahead was still fraught with danger, but now they had new allies, new insights into the nature of their struggle. Auric raised the Twilight blade high, its edge gleaming with both light and shadow. Together, he declared, his voice carrying across the assembled forces of Twilight, we march towards a new dawn, not of blinding light or consuming darkness, but of perfect, harmonious balance. The cheers that rose from the combined army, human, fae, and Shadowkin alike, echoed through the Shadowfen, a clarion call of hope in the heart of corruption. The quest for the Eclipse Mantle lay ahead, but now Auric knew that victory was not just possible, but inevitable. The Twilight Champion had assembled his team, a force as diverse and balanced as the Twilight itself. The final battle for the fate of the realm was about to begin. Chapter 16. The unlikely alliance of light, shadow, and twilight had transformed their camp into a microcosm of the balance they sought to restore to the realm. As the last rays of an otherworldly sunset filtered through the mists of the Shadowfen, Auric stood atop a small rise, surveying the bustling activity below. Knights of the Sunlit Order mingled with Shadowkin warriors, exchanging techniques and stories. Whisper flitted from group to group, its playful nature a welcome respite from the oppressive atmosphere of the swamp. Lady Lumina and Shade stood in deep conversation, their auras of light and shadow intermingling in a display that would have been unthinkable mere days ago. Captain Pharaoh approached, his gruff features softened by a rare smile. "Never thought I'd see the day," he mused. "Light and shadow, working as one." Auric nodded, feeling the weight of the moment. "This is what we're fighting for, Pharaoh. Not victory of one side over the other, but true harmony." As night fell, Auric called a council of war. In a clearing lit by bioluminescent fungi and motes of celestial light, he gathered his most trusted advisors. Lady Lumina, Captain Pharaoh, Elder Sulus, Whisper, and Shade formed a circle around a makeshift map of the Shadowfan's heart. "The eclipse mantle lies here," Auric said, pointing to a pulsing shadow at the map's center. "But Cinder and Umbra will be expecting us. We need a plan that utilizes all of our strengths." Shade's form rippled as it leaned forward. "The shadows here are wrong, twisted, but we can use that to our advantage. My Shadowkin can move unseen, even in this corrupted darkness." Lady Lumina nodded, her eyes gleaming with strategic insight. "And our light can serve as a distraction, drawing their forces away from your true approach." "Don't forget the Fae," Whisper chimed in, its voice like tinkling bells. "We may not be warriors, but we know a thing or two about misdirection." As the council debated strategies late into the night, Auric felt a familiar presence at his side. Elder Solus stood there, his unseeing eyes somehow conveying a depth of understanding that transcended sight. "You've come far, Twilight Champion," the old seer murmured. "But the greatest test lies ahead. The eclipse mantle is not just a source of power, but a key to understanding. Are you prepared for what you might learn?" Auric's hand unconsciously went to the twilight blade at his hip. "I have to be," he replied softly. "For the sake of the realm, for the balance we seek to restore." As the council concluded and the others dispersed to prepare, Auric found himself drawn to the edge of the camp. There, where the barrier between their sanctuary and the corrupted swamp was thinnest, he could feel the pulse of the eclipse mantle calling to him. Closing his eyes, Auric reached out with his senses, feeling the currents of light and shadow that flowed through the realm. The dawn star at his hip hummed with celestial energy, while the twilight blade resonated with the power of both light and darkness. And there, in the distance, the eclipse mantle pulsed with a rhythm that seemed to complete a cosmic triad. As he stood there, balanced between worlds, Auric felt a clarity he had never known before. The path ahead was fraught with danger, yes, but also with possibility. In claiming the eclipse mantle, in bringing together the 3 sacred relics, he would not just be gaining power, but understanding. The true nature of the conflict, the role of the Twilight Champion, the destiny of the realm itself, all would be revealed. A soft touch on his arm brought Auric back to the present. Lady Lumina stood beside him, her eyes reflecting the starlight above. "It's time," she said simply. Auric nodded, squaring his shoulders. He turned back to the camp, where his diverse army waited, united in purpose despite their differences. With a gesture, he called them to attention. "Tomorrow, we march into the heart of the Shadowfan," Auric proclaimed, his voice carrying the weight of destiny. "We go not as conquerors, but as seekers of balance. Remember, our strength lies not in overwhelming force, but in the harmony we create together." A chorus of agreement rose from the assembled forces, the clash of sunlit order shields, the whisper of Shadowkin movements, the melodic hum of Fey magic. It was a symphony of twilight, a prelude to the battle that would decide the fate of the realm. As the army settled in for one last night of rest, Auric took a moment to center himself. He thought of all that had led him to this point: his fall from grace, his exile, his redemption. Each step, each trial had prepared him for this moment. The Twilight Champion stood ready, balanced between light and shadow, poised to face whatever challenges the dawn would bring. The calm before the storm settled over the camp, but within Auric's heart burned a fire of purpose, ready to illuminate the path to a new era of true balance. Chapter 17. Dawn broke over the Shadowfen, a sickly light filtering through the miasma that hung thick in the air. Auric stood at the head of his diverse army, the twilight blade gleaming at his side, and the dawn star pulsing softly at his hip. Before them lay the twisted heart of the swamp, where the eclipse mantle awaited, and with it, the forces of Lord Cinder and Umbra. "Remember the plan," Auric's voice carried to his assembled forces. "We move as one, light and shadow in harmony." With a nod to Lady Lumina, the vanguard of Sunlit Order knights advanced, their armor gleaming defiantly against the corrupted landscape. Shadowkin melted into the murk, becoming one with the darkness as they flanked the main force. Whisper and the Fae darted between, weaving illusions to confuse and misdirect. As they pressed deeper into the Shadowfen, the corruption grew more intense. Twisted vegetation reached out with thorny tendrils, while pools of shadow bubbled with malevolent intent. Auric felt the weight of the realm's fate upon his shoulders, each step bringing them closer to the final confrontation. Suddenly, a screech rent the air. Shadow creatures, more twisted and feral than any they had encountered before, burst from the swamp. The battle was joined in an instant, light and darkness clashing in a symphony of twilight. Auric found himself at the heart of the melee, the twilight blade singing as it cut through corrupted flesh and shadow alike. To his left, Captain Pharaoh roared defiance, his seasoned blade finding vulnerable spots in the creature's defenses. To his right, Shade moved with liquid grace, its shadow form allowing it to strike where the enemy least expected. As they fought, Auric sensed a shift in the air. The pull of the eclipse mantle grew stronger, almost overwhelming in its intensity. "Press on," he called out, his voice carrying over the din of battle. "We're close." But as they neared their goal, a familiar, chilling laugh echoed across the battlefield. Lord Cinder materialized before them, his form a nightmarish fusion of shadow and corrupted flesh. At his side stood Umbra, the assassin's eyes gleaming with deadly intent. "So, the fallen knight returns," Cinder's voice dripped with malice. "Come to play hero once more, Auric, or should I say Twilight Champion?" Auric stood firm, the twilight blade held ready. "This ends now, Cinder. The realm will no longer suffer under your corruption." Cinder's laugh turned harsh. "Fool, you understand nothing. The shadow plague isn't corruption. It's evolution. Noctis sees the truth that you're too blind to comprehend." "There are truths hidden in shadow," Auric countered, thinking of his Shadowkin allies. "But this twisted version isn't one of them. True balance is what we seek, not domination." As they spoke, Auric noticed Umbra slipping away, moving towards a pulsing darkness that could only be the resting place of the eclipse mantle. With a thought, he signaled to Whisper and the Fae. Illusory copies of Auric sprang into existence, confusing Cinder and allowing the real Twilight Champion to break away in pursuit of Umbra. The chase led them to a clearing where reality itself seemed to warp and twist. There, suspended in a vortex of shadow and corrupted light, hung the eclipse mantle. Its power called to Auric, resonating with the dawn star and twilight blade in a cosmic harmony. Umbra turned, daggers of pure shadow materializing in his hands. "You're too late, Twilight Champion. The mantle belongs to Noctis now." Auric raised the twilight blade, its edge gleaming with the perfect balance of light and shadow. "It belongs to neither of us, Umbra. It's a key to understanding, not a weapon to be wielded." As they clashed, blade against shadow-forged daggers, Auric felt the power of the sacred relics surge within him. Each movement became more fluid, more purposeful, as if guided by the collective wisdom of all the Twilight Champions who had come before. Their battle raged across the clearing, neither able to gain a decisive advantage. But with each exchange, Auric sensed something shifting in Umbra, a flicker of doubt, a hesitation in his attacks. "You don't have to serve Noctis," Auric said between clashes. "There's another way, a balance between light and shadow." Umbra's eyes narrowed. "And who would show us this way? You, the fallen knight who couldn't even save his own honor." The words stung, but Auric stood firm. "Not me alone. All of us together, light, shadow, and everything in between." As they fought, the eclipse mantle pulsed more intensely. Auric could feel it calling to him, urging him to complete the trinity of sacred relics. With a final decisive move, he disarmed Umbra, sending the assassin stumbling back. Auric stood before the eclipse mantle, his hand outstretched. This was the moment of truth, the culmination of his journey from fallen knight to Twilight Champion. As his fingers closed around the mantle, a surge of power unlike anything he had ever experienced coursed through him. Visions flashed before his eyes, the true history of the realm, the nature of the conflict between light and shadow, the role of the Twilight Champion throughout the ages. Understanding flooded his being, and with it, a sense of purpose so profound it took his breath away. As the visions cleared, Auric found himself transformed. The eclipse mantle had merged with his armor, completing the set of sacred relics. He stood as a perfect embodiment of twilight, neither blinding light nor consuming darkness, but the harmonious balance between. Umbra stared in awe, his earlier bravado replaced by uncertainty. What are you?" Auric's voice resonated with newfound power and wisdom. "I am what I was always meant to be, the Twilight Champion, guardian of balance. And I offer you a choice, Umbra. Continue down this path of corruption, or join us in seeking true harmony." As Umbra wavered, caught between loyalty to Noctis and the undeniable truth before him, the sounds of battle drew closer. The final confrontation with Lord Cinder and the forces of corrupted shadow loomed. Auric stood ready, the power of all three sacred relics humming in perfect resonance. The true test of the Twilight Champion was about to begin, and with it, the fate of the entire realm hung in the balance. Chapter 18. The Shadowfen trembled with the clash of opposing forces. Auric, now fully embodying the Twilight Champion with all three sacred relics, stood at the epicenter of the chaos. The eclipse mantle, merged with his armor, pulsed with otherworldly power, while the Twilight Blade and Dawnstar resonated in perfect harmony. Umbra, still reeling from the offer of redemption, hesitated at the edge of the clearing. But before Auric could press his advantage, a roar of fury split the air. Lord Cinder burst through the twisted vegetation, his form more monstrous than ever, corruption oozing from every pore. "You dare?" Cinder snarled, his voice a cacophony of rage and shadow. "You think donning some pretty trinkets makes you worthy of challenging the will of Noctis?" Auric stood his ground, the power of twilight swirling around him. "This ends now, Cinder. The realm will know balance once more." With a howl of defiance, Cinder launched himself at Auric. The Twilight Champion met the attack head-on, the Twilight Blade clashing against Cinder's corrupted claws in a shower of light and shadow. As they battled, the very fabric of reality seemed to warp around them. The power of the sacred relics clashed with the twisted energies of the shadow plate, creating rifts in space and time. Through these tears, Auric caught glimpses of other battles, other times, past Twilight Champions facing their own trials, future conflicts yet to unfold. But even as Auric held his own against Cinder, he sensed a growing rawness. The corruption of the Shadowfen was intensifying, feeding off the unleashed energies of their conflict. With horror, he realized that their battle was only accelerating the spread of the shadow plague. Yes, Cinder cackled, sensing Auric's dismay. You see it now, don't you? Your precious balance is nothing but a fleeting dream. The shadow will consume all. Auric's mind raced, searching for a solution. He reached out with his newfound senses, trying to understand the flow of energies around them. There had to be a way to contain this, to prevent the corruption from spreading further. But as he divided his attention, Cinder pressed his advantage. A vicious blow sent Auric reeling, the twilight blade flying from his grasp. It embedded itself in the corrupted earth, quivering with unleashed power. Auric. Lady Lumina's voice cut through the chaos. She and Captain Pharaoh fought their way through a horde of shadow creatures, trying to reach the Twilight Champion. But they were too far, too late. Cinder loomed over Auric, his corrupted form swelling with dark power. Your little rebellion ends here, Twilight Champion. Watch as your precious realm falls to shadow. With a gesture of immense power, Cinder tore open a rift in reality larger than any before. Through it poured an army of shadow creatures, more numerous and terrible than anything they had yet faced. The forces of Twilight, caught off guard by this new onslaught, began to falter. Auric struggled to his feet, the weight of apparent defeat crushing down upon him. He had failed. Despite all his growth, all the power of the Sacred Relics, he had underestimated the cunning of his foes and the insidious nature of the shadow plague. As the tide of battle turned against them, Auric made a desperate decision. Calling upon all the power granted to him by the Sacred Relics, he created a barrier of twilight energy, separating his allies from the encroaching horde. Fall back, he commanded, his voice carrying the weight of divine authority. Retreat to the Radiant Citadel, regroup, and prepare for what's to come. Lady Lumina's eyes widened in realization. Auric, no, you can't face this alone. But the Twilight Champion's decision was made. With a final surge of power, he pushed his allies back through a rift of his own making, sealing it behind them. He stood alone now, facing Cinder and his army of shadows. Noble sacrifice, Cinder sneered. But futile, you've only delayed the inevitable. Auric raised his head, meeting Cinder's gaze with defiance. Perhaps, but sometimes, a moment is all that's needed to change the course of destiny. As Cinder's forces closed in around him, Auric centered himself. He might fall here, but he would ensure that his allies had the time they needed to prepare for the coming storm. The Twilight Champion stood ready, a lone beacon of balance against the encroaching darkness. The Shadowfen erupted in a cataclysm of light and shadow, the fate of the realm hanging by a thread. And in that moment of apparent defeat, the true test of the Twilight Champion had only just begun. Chapter 19. The Radiant Citadel, once a bastion of unwavering light, now stood as a last refuge of twilight in a world teetering on the brink. Within its halls, the survivors of the Shadowfen battle gathered, their spirits as battered as their bodies. Lady Lumina paced the chamber of illumination, her radiance dimmed by worry and exhaustion. Captain Pharaoh stood silent, his gruff features etched with a pain that went beyond physical wounds. We shouldn't have left him, Pharaoh growled, breaking the heavy silence. A soldier never abandons their commander. Lady Lumina turned, her eyes flashing with a mixture of anger and anguish. It was his choice, Captain, or it gave us a chance to fight another day. As if summoned by the mention of his name, a shimmering apparition materialized in the center of the chamber. It was Auric, or rather, an echo of him, his form translucent and flickering, but unmistakably alive. "My friends," the image of Auric spoke, his voice distant yet clear. "If you're seeing this, then my gambit in the Shadowfen was costlier than I hoped. But do not despair, this is not the end, but a new beginning." The gathered allies leaned in, hope rekindling in their eyes. Whisper flitted closer, its usual mischief replaced by rapt attention. Auric's image continued. "The power of the sacred relics has shown me truths beyond imagining. The shadow plate is not just corruption, but a symptom of a greater imbalance. Noctis believes he's guiding the realm towards evolution, but his methods will only lead to destruction." The apparition waved its hand, and suddenly the chamber was filled with swirling visions, glimpses of the realm's past, present, and possible futures. The assembled group gasped as they saw the true scope of their conflict. "We've been fighting the wrong battle," Auric explained. "It's not about destroying the darkness, but about restoring true balance. The cosmic scales must be reset, and only the combined power of light, shadow, and twilight can accomplish this." Lady Lumina stepped forward, her voice thick with emotion. "But how, Auric? You hold the sacred relics, and you're trapped in the heart of enemy territory." The image of Auric smiled, a glimmer of his old determination shining through. "The relics are powerful, yes, but they're also a key to awakening the latent power within each of you. Look deep within yourselves. The ability to wield Twilight is not limited to the Twilight Champion alone." As if in response to his words, motes of light began to swirl around the gathered allies. Shadowkin warriors found their forms solidifying, no longer bound solely to shadow. Knights of the Sunlit Order felt a new understanding of darkness blooming within them. And beings like Whisper and Shade discovered a harmony between their natures that they had never known before. "This is your true strength," Auric's apparition declared. "Not in overwhelming force, but in the balance you create together. You must rally the realm, gather all who would stand for harmony, and prepare for the final confrontation." Captain Pharaoh straightened, newfound purpose hardening his resolve. "And what of you, lad? How can we reach you?" Auric's image flickered, growing fainter. "I'll continue to fight from within to disrupt Noctis's plans and weaken his hold. When the time is right, when the balance begins to shift, you'll know how to find me. Trust in the Twilight. Trust in yourselves." As the apparition faded, a surge of energy pulsed through the chamber. Each being there felt a connection, a resonance with the very fabric of the realm itself. They understood now, not just intellectually, but in the very core of their beings, what Auric had sacrificed himself to teach them. Lady Lumina stood tall, her radiance now tempered with shadows that danced at her edges. "You heard our Twilight Champion. We have work to do." Shade nodded, its form now shimmering with both darkness and light. "We shall reach out to all corners of the realm. Those who hide in shadow will hear our call. And those who cling too tightly to the light will learn the beauty of twilight," added a Sunlit Order knight, his armor now gleaming with a more subdued, balanced glow. Whisper darted through the air, leaving trails of twilight in its wake. "Oh, what a tale this will be, the grand alliance of all beings, marching to restore balance to the realm." As the chamber erupted into activity, plans being made and messengers dispatched, there was a palpable sense of renewed hope. They had suffered a great setback, yes, but from that apparent defeat had risen a new understanding, a new strength. Outside the Radiant Citadel, the world still teetered on the brink of chaos. The shadow plague continued to spread, and Noctis's power grew with each passing moment. But within the Citadel's walls, a spark had been lit. a spark of twilight that would soon grow into a blazing beacon of hope for all the realm. The final battle was coming, and this time they would face it not as separate forces of light and shadow, but as a united front of twilight, with the wisdom of Auric guiding their way. The Twilight Champion's sacrifice had not been in vain. It had become the rallying cry for a new age of true balance. Chapter 20. The Nexus of Balance, a hidden sanctuary where light and shadow had coexisted in harmony for eons, now served as the staging ground for the final confrontation. Auric, battered but unbroken, had managed to escape Cinder's clutches and make his way to this sacred place. The power of the Sacred Relics hummed around him, their energies intertwining with the very fabric of reality. As Auric meditated at the heart of the Nexus, he sensed the approach of his allies. Lady Lumina led the vanguard, her aura a perfect blend of radiance and shadow. Captain Pharaoh marched alongside Shade, their unlikely partnership a testament to the new understanding that had blossomed in Auric's absence. Whisper flitted about, its fey nature now a conduit for twilight energies. "You made it," Auric said, rising to greet them. His voice carried the weight of his trials, but also a newfound strength. Lady Lumina stepped forward, her eyes shimmering with emotion. "We follow the path you laid out for us, Twilight Champion. The realm stands united, ready to face Noctis and restore true balance." Before Auric could respond, the air around them began to warp and twist. Reality itself seemed to buckle under an immense pressure. With a sound like the shattering of 1,000 mirrors, a rift tore open in the center of the Nexus. Noctis, the fallen angel, stepped through. His form was a study in contradictions, blindingly bright yet darker than the deepest void, beautiful and terrible in equal measure. Wings of shadow and light unfurled behind him, each feather a blade that could cut through the very fabric of existence. "So," Noctis's voice resonated with power, "the prodigal knight returns, thinking himself a champion of balance." His gaze swept over the assembled forces of twilight. "And you've brought friends, how quaint." Auric stood tall, the twilight blade gleaming in his hand. "This ends now, Noctis. Your vision of evolution through destruction ends here." Noctis laughed, the sound both melodious and discordant. "Oh, Auric, this is only the beginning. The shadow plague is not destruction, but transformation. I will remake this realm into something greater, beyond the petty constraints of light and shadow." "At what cost?" Auric challenged. "Look around you, Noctis. See what your evolution has wrought. The realm suffers, balance destroyed, all in the name of your twisted ambition." For a moment, something flickered in Noctis's eyes, a hint of doubt, perhaps, or a memory of what he once was. But it was gone in an instant, replaced by cold determination. "Enough talk," Noctis declared. With a gesture, he summoned an army of shadow creatures, more terrible and numerous than any they had faced before. "Let us settle this, once and for all." The battle erupted with cataclysmic force. Auric and Noctis clashed at its center, the twilight blade meeting Noctis's weapons of pure energy. Each blow sent shockwaves through the Nexus, ripples of power that threatened to tear reality asunder. Around them, the forces of twilight fought with everything they had. Lady Lumina and Shade moved in perfect synchronicity, their combined powers of light and shadow devastating Noctis's forces. Captain Pharaoh roared defiance, his blade now wreathed in twilight energy. Whisper and its fey kin wove illusions that confounded and trapped the shadow creatures. As the battle raged, Auric felt the power of the Sacred Relics growing stronger. The Dawn Star pulsed with celestial light, The eclipse mantle thrummed with Shadow's potential, and the twilight blade sang with the harmony of both. Understanding dawned on him. This was the moment the relics had been preparing him for. Noctis, Auric called out, parrying a vicious strike. It doesn't have to be this way. There's another path, one of true balance, not domination. Noctis hesitated, his attack faltering for a crucial moment. Balance, there is no balance in a stagnant world, Twilight Champion. Only through change can we evolve. Then let us change together, Auric pressed, sensing a crack in Noctis's resolve. Not through destruction, but through understanding. The power of twilight shows us the way, not light obliterating darkness, nor shadow consuming light, but both in harmony, strengthening each other. As they fought, Auric channeled the combined power of the Sacred Relics. Tendrils of twilight energy began to weave through the nexus, touching everyone present, ally and enemy alike. Each being felt a profound shift, a glimpse of the true balance that Auric spoke of. Noctis's eyes widened as the energy touched him, centuries of bitterness and pain warring with a newfound understanding. This is not possible, he whispered, his voice losing its cold edge. It is, Auric affirmed, lowering his blade. This is the true evolution. Noctis, not the domination of one force over another, but the harmonious blending of all. The fallen angel stood frozen, conflict evident in every line of his being. The fate of the realm hung in the balance, waiting on Noctis's choice: continued destruction or a chance at true harmony. As allies and enemies alike watched with bated breath, Auric extended his hand to Noctis, the twilight blade pulsing with an offer of redemption. The final moment of truth had arrived, and with it, the potential for a new dawn for the entire realm. Chapter 21. The nexus of balance trembled, reality itself bending under the weight of the moment. Noctis stood frozen, his eyes fixed on Auric's outstretched hand. The offer of redemption hung in the air, a gossamer thread of hope in a maelstrom of conflict. For a heartbeat, it seemed as though Noctis might accept. His wings, once instruments of destruction, folded slightly, and a flicker of his former radiance shone through the corruption that had consumed him. But then, with a roar that shook the very foundations of the realm, Noctis recoiled. "No," he howled, his form swelling with dark energy. "I will not be swayed by your petty notions of balance. The realm will be remade in my image, or it will burn." The rejection of peace sent a shockwave through the nexus. The carefully maintained balance of the sanctuary began to crumble, light and shadow warring for dominance in chaotic swirls of power. Auric gritted his teeth, raising the twilight blade once more. "So be it," he declared, his voice carrying the weight of countless ages. "Then we end this here and now." With a thought, Auric reached out to his allies through the twilight energy that connected them all. "Everyone," his voice resonated in their minds, "lend me your strength. Only together can we hope to restore true balance." As one, the forces of twilight responded. Lady Lumina and Shade channeled their combined powers of light and shadow. Captain Pharaoh's unwavering determination flowed like a river of steel. Whisper and the Fae wove their wild, untamed energies into the mix. Even the reformed shadow creatures, touched by the revelation of twilight, added their essence to the growing power. Auric felt the energy building within him, a perfect synthesis of light, shadow, and everything in between. The sacred relics pulsed in harmony, their true potential finally unlocked. Noctis, sensing the shift in power, unleashed his full might. Wings of corrupted light and pure shadow spread wide, tearing rifts in reality. From these tears poured the essence of the shadow play, a twisting, writhing mass of anti-creation that threatened to unmake everything it touched. The two titans clashed, their battle transcending the physical realm. Each strike of the Twilight blade against Noctis's corrupted form sent ripples through time and space. Visions of past conflicts and potential futures flashed around them, the fate of all realities hanging in the balance. As they fought, Auric began to understand the true nature of their conflict. Noctis wasn't just an enemy to be vanquished, but a reflection of the realm's own imbalance. To defeat him wasn't enough. He needed to be healed, brought back into harmony with the world he sought to remake. With this realization, Auric changed his tactics. Instead of striking to destroy, he began to weave a complex pattern with the Twilight blade, channeling the combined energy of his allies and the Sacred Relics. "What are you doing?" Noctis snarled, his attacks growing more frenzied as he sensed the shift. "What I should have done from the beginning," Auric replied, his voice calm despite the maelstrom around them. "I'm showing you the truth, Noctis, the truth of what you once were, what you could be again." The Twilight energy coalesced into a shimmering web, enveloping both Auric and Noctis. Within its strands, the history of the realm played out the initial harmony, the growing discord, the sundering that had torn light and shadow apart. And through it all, the constant cycle of the Twilight Champion, striving to maintain balance. Noctis's attacks faltered as the visions washed over him. "No," he whispered, but the denial lacked his earlier conviction. "This can't be." "But it is," Auric pressed, continuing his intricate weave of twilight. "You were meant to be a guardian of balance, Noctis, not its destroyer. The shadow plague isn't evolution. It's a cry for help from a realm out of alignment." As the truth of Auric's words sank in, Noctis's form began to change. The corruption that had twisted him for so long started to melt away, revealing the luminous being he had once been. With a final, monumental effort, Auric brought the Twilight blade down in a blazing arc of pure Twilight energy. But instead of striking Noctis, the blade pierced the very fabric of reality, straight into the heart of the imbalance that had plagued the realm for eons. A soundless explosion erupted from the point of impact, washing over everything in waves of harmonious twilight. The shadow plague dissipated like mist before the dawn, its purpose fulfilled, its cry for balance finally heard. As the light faded, Auric and Noctis stood facing each other, both forever changed by the encounter. The nexus of balance, nearly destroyed in the conflict, began to repair itself, stronger and more vibrant than ever before. Noctis, his form now a perfect blend of light and shadow, looked at Auric with newfound understanding. "Twilight Champion," he said, his voice heavy with the weight of ages. I see now. What have I done?" Auric, exhausted but triumphant, extended his hand once more. "What's done is done. The question now is, what will you do to help restore the balance you once swore to protect?" As Noctis reached out to clasp Auric's hand, the assembled forces of Twilight let out a cheer that echoed across the realm. The climactic battle was over, but the true work of restoring balance had only just begun. The Twilight Champion stood at the center of it all, the Sacred Relics thrumming with renewed purpose. The dawn of a new age was breaking, one of true harmony between light and shadow. And Auric, once a fallen knight, now stood as the beacon of hope for a realm reborn in Twilight's embrace. Chapter 22. The nexus of balance pulsed with newfound vitality, its energies rippling outward across the realm. Auric stood at its center, the Twilight blade planted in the ground before him, the dawn star and eclipse mantle humming in perfect harmony. Beside him, Noctis, no longer the corrupted fallen angel, but a being of balanced twilight, gazed out at the transforming world with wonder and remorse. "I never thought," Noctis began, his voice thick with emotion. All this time, I believed I was guiding the realm towards evolution. Instead, I nearly destroyed everything. Auric placed a hand on Noctis's shoulder, his touch conveying understanding rather than judgment. The path to balance is never straight, old friend. What matters is that you found your way back to it. As they spoke, their allies gathered around them. Lady Lumina, her aura now a perfect blend of light and shadow, stepped forward. "The shadow plague is receding," she reported, her voice filled with cautious hope. "But the realm is still in turmoil. There's much work to be done." Captain Pharaoh nodded gruffly, his armor gleaming with a subdued twilight sheen. "Aye, and not everyone will be quick to accept this new balance. There will be resistance, both from those who cling to pure light and those who have grown accustomed to shadow." Whisper flitted between them, leaving trails of twilight in its wake. "But think of the stories we'll tell," the Fae Spirit chirped. "The Great Reconciliation, the dawn of the Twilight Age." Auric smiled at his companion's words, feeling the weight of responsibility settle upon him. The battle might be won, but the true challenge of maintaining balance was only beginning. "You're all right," he acknowledged. "The road ahead won't be easy, but together we can show the realm the beauty and strength of twilight." With a gesture, Auric summoned a vision in the air before them. The realm spread out like a living map, points of light, shadow, and the growing influence of twilight clearly visible. "We'll need to establish new centers of learning," he mused, pointing to key locations. "Places where the wisdom of balance can be taught and cultivated." Noctis stepped forward, his eyes fixed on the areas still darkened by lingering corruption. "I'll focus my efforts there," he declared. "It's my responsibility to heal the wounds I've caused." Lady Lumina nodded in agreement. "And I'll work with the Sunlit Order, helping them understand that embracing shadow doesn't mean losing their light." As they planned, Auric felt a familiar presence. Elder Solus materialized from the twilight energies, his unseeing eyes somehow conveying a depth of wisdom and approval. "Well done, Twilight Champion," the old seer said, his voice carrying the weight of ages. "You succeeded where many before you have failed. But remember, balance is not a destination, but a continuous journey." Auric bowed his head in acknowledgement. "I understand, Elder. The mantle of Twilight Champion is not one to be set aside, but to be carried always." As if in response to his words, the Sacred Relics pulsed with renewed purpose. Auric realized that they were no longer separate artifacts, but had become a part of him, extensions of his role as guardian of balance. With a sweep of his hand, Auric dismissed the vision. "Let's begin," he said, his voice ringing with determination. "There's a realm to heal and a new age of twilight to usher in." One by one, his companions nodded, each setting off to their assigned tasks. Noctis paused before departing, meeting Auric's gaze with a mix of gratitude and resolve. "Thank you," the former fallen angel said simply, "for showing me the way back to the light, and for teaching me the value of shadow." As Noctis took flight, his wings now a beautiful interplay of radiance and darkness, Auric turned his attention to the nexus of balance. This place, once hidden and forgotten, would become the heart of their efforts to maintain harmony in the realm. With a thought, Auric channeled the power of the Sacred Relics, sending out a pulse of twilight energy that resonated with every being touched by their recent battle. It was a call, an invitation to all who would walk the path of balance. As the pulse spread across the realm, Auric felt a profound sense of rightness settle over him. The journey that had begun with his fall from grace had led him here, to a destiny greater than he could have ever imagined. The Twilight Champion stood tall, ready to face whatever challenges the future might bring. The age of twilight had dawned, and with it, the promise of a realm united in perfect, harmonious balance. Chapter 23. The golden spires of the radiant citadel gleamed in the soft light of twilight, no longer a bastion of pure radiance, but a testament to the new balance that had settled over the realm. Auric stood atop its highest tower, his armor a perfect blend of light and shadow, the sacred relics now, an intrinsic part of his being. Below, the city bustled with a newfound vitality. Knights of the Summit Order walked side by side with reformed Shadowkin, their previous animosity replaced by mutual understanding. Whisper and its fey kin darted between them, weaving playful illusions that danced between light and shadow. Lady Lumina approached, her own transformation evident in the twilight aura that surrounded her. "The last of the refugees have returned," she reported, a smile touching her lips. "It's almost hard to believe how much has changed in so short a time." Auric nodded, his gaze sweeping over the realm that stretched out before them. "And yet, in many ways, we're only just beginning." As if to emphasize his point, a shimmer in the air heralded the arrival of Noctis. The former fallen angel alighted on the tower, his wings folding neatly behind him. "The Shadow Fun is almost fully restored," Noctis announced, a note of wonder in his voice. "Life is returning to areas I thought forever lost to corruption." "Well done," Auric commended, clasping Noctis's shoulder. The gesture, once unthinkable, now felt as natural as breathing. Captain Pharaoh's gruff voice called up from below. "If you're done admiring the view, we've got visitors at the gate. Seems word of our Twilight Champion has spread far and wide." Auric descended to the courtyard, where a diverse group of beings from across the realm had gathered. There were emissaries from distant lands, scholars seeking wisdom, and ordinary folk drawn by tales of the new balance. As Auric moved among them, listening to their stories and offering guidance, he felt the weight of his role more keenly than ever. He was no longer just a knight or even a champion, but a living symbol of the harmony they all sought to maintain. Elder Suluz materialized at the edge of the gathering, his unseeing eyes somehow finding Auric. "You've come far, Twilight Champion," the old seer mused. "From a fallen knight to the heart of a new age, how does it feel to return to the world you once knew, so profoundly changed?" Auric considered the question, feeling the pulse of the sacred relics within him. "It's humbling," he admitted, "to think that my personal journey of redemption could lead to such widespread transformation." And yet, Solus pressed, the ordinary world still turns. Crops must be sown, disputes settled, lives lived. How will you balance your cosmic role with the everyday needs of the realm? The question gave Auric pause. He looked around at the people gathered in the courtyard, each with their own hopes, fears, and challenges. The battle against Noctis and the Shadow Plague had been monumental, but in many ways, the real work was just beginning. "By remembering that true balance isn't found in grand gestures," Auric finally answered, "but in the small daily choices we all make. My role is not to rule or dictate, but to guide and support." As if in response to his words, the twilight blade hummed at his side. Auric drew it, its edge shimmering with the perfect harmony of light and shadow. With a gesture, he created a small rift in the air, a window to other parts of the realm. Through it, they could see the changes taking hold. The Twilight Forest, once a place of mystery and danger, now served as a training ground for those learning to walk the path of balance. The Shadowfen, stripped of its corruption, blossomed with new life that bridged the gap between light and shadow. Even the cosmic scales, that metaphysical construct that maintained balance in the realm, seemed more stable than ever before. Its rhythm pulsed in harmony with the sacred relics, a constant reminder of the delicate equilibrium they all worked to maintain. As the vision faded, Auric turned back to the gathered crowd. "We've won a great victory," he declared, his voice carrying across the courtyard. "But our true challenge lies in the days, months, and years to come. To maintain this balance, to help it flourish, that is the task before us all." A murmur of agreement rippled through the assembly. Auric could see the determination in their eyes, the shared commitment to this new path. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of twilight, Auric felt a profound sense of peace settle over him. The ordinary world had changed, yes, but so had he. And together, they would forge a future where light and shadow danced in perfect harmony. The Twilight Champion stood ready, no longer a fallen knight seeking redemption, but a guardian of balance prepared to face whatever challenges the dawn might bring. Chapter 24. The seasons turned, and the realm settled into a new rhythm. The radiant citadel, once a fortress of pure light, now stood as a beacon of twilight, its spires reflecting the perfect balance between day and night. Auric, the Twilight Champion, sat in quiet meditation atop the highest tower, the Sacred Relics humming softly in harmony with the pulse of the world. As he opened his eyes, Auric surveyed the land that had changed so much yet remained familiar. The scars of the shadow plague had faded, replaced by a landscape where light and shadow coexisted in beautiful complexity. In the distance, he could see the shimmering barrier of the Twilight Forest, now a place of learning where seekers of balance came to study the interplay of forces. A gentle breeze carried the sound of laughter from the courtyards below. Children of all races played together, their natural affinity for twilight a sign of hope for future generations. Among them, whisper darted to and fro, its mischievous nature now tempered with the wisdom of balance. Lady Lumina approached, her once blindingly radiant form now a subtle interplay of light and shadow. "The envoys from the Shadowfen have arrived," she reported. "Noctis sends word of strange energy stirring in the deepest parts of the swamp." Auric nodded, a flicker of concern crossing his features. "And the cosmic scales?" "Stable, but..." Lumina hesitated, choosing her words carefully. Elder Solus senses a shift on the horizon, something beyond our realm that might threaten the balance we've worked so hard to achieve. As if summoned by her words, a rift in reality shimmered into existence before them. Through it, they glimpsed a world unlike their own, a place where the struggle between light and shadow had taken a very different path. The Twilight Codex spoke of other realms, Auric mused, his hand unconsciously moving to the twilight blade at his hip. "Perhaps our work here was just the beginning." Captain Pharaoh's gruff voice interrupted their contemplation. "Begging your pardon, Twilight Champion, but we've got more immediate concerns. A village on the outskirts is reporting strange occurrences. Shadows moving of their own accord, lights that shine in deepest night." Auric smiled, feeling the familiar stirring of adventure. "Then we'd best investigate, assemble a team, Pharaoh, a mix of light and shadow adepts, if you please." As preparations were made, Auric felt a presence materialize beside him. Elder Solus, his unseeing eyes somehow conveying a mix of pride and concern. "You've brought great change to this realm, Twilight Champion," the old seer said. "But remember, balance is not a state to be achieved, but a path to be walked. Each day brings new challenges, new opportunities to prove the strength of Twilight." Auric nodded, understanding the weight of the seer's words. "And we'll face them together, as we always have." As they descended to the courtyard, Auric was struck by the sight before him. Knights in armor that shimmered between light and shadow stood ready. Shadowkin, once feared and hunted, now proudly wore the emblem of the Twilight Order. Even a few fey beings, their wild nature now tempered with purpose, had joined the ranks. Quite a change from the lone, fallen knight who stumbled into the outlands, Noctis commented, appearing in a swirl of twilight energy. The former fallen angel, now a steadfast ally, wore a wry smile. "We've all changed," Auric replied, clasping Noctis's arm in friendship. "And I suspect we'll continue to do so. The path of Twilight is ever-evolving." As the team prepared to depart, Auric felt the Sacred Relics pulse with anticipation. The Dawn Star, the Eclipse Mantle, and the Twilight Blade were no longer mere objects of power, but extensions of his very being, reminders of the delicate balance he strove to maintain. With a gesture, Auric opened a rift that would take them to the troubled village. Before stepping through, he turned to address the assembled crowd. "Remember," he said, his voice carrying the authority of the Twilight Champion, "our strength lies not in dominating light or shadow, but in embracing both. Whatever challenges we face them together as guardians of true balance." A cheer rose from the gathering, a symphony of voices that spanned the spectrum from brightest light to deepest shadow. As Auric stepped through the rift, leading his team towards new adventures, he felt a profound sense of purpose. The age of Twilight was still young, and many challenges lay ahead. But with the wisdom gained from his journey, the power of the Sacred Relics, and the support of allies who understood the true meaning of balance, Auric knew that they were ready for whatever the future might bring. As the rift closed behind them, the radiant citadel stood proud, a testament to how far they had come, and a beacon of hope for all who sought the harmony of Twilight. The story of the fallen knight, who became the Twilight Champion, had ended, but the legend of Auric and his allies was far from over. New adventures awaited across their own realm and perhaps beyond, as they continued their eternal quest to maintain the delicate, beautiful balance of Twilight. The end.